I am Amy Chilton. I am the board president of Awesome Women in Technology. And I just want to welcome everybody to Gal-entine's Day. This is one of our favorite events every year because it is where we get to celebrate you, our members. And we have a lot of fun. And tonight we have some great programming, and we're having, we're going to be doing some drawings and giveaways. So we're super excited. I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who made it tonight. The last week was certainly a challenge and a struggle for us all. So if you had the emotional capacity to get here tonight, hats off to you. I'm sure our attendance is going to be lower because people are just emotionally exhausted at this point. And I don't blame them. And, just remember to check up on your friends and your family and your neighbors, and, just remind them that, we will get through this. It's just tough. And, so I wanted to thank y'all all for, just being with us tonight. I also want to thank our sponsors, and you can see them here on the screen: Cirrus Logic, Apex, Digital Turbine. I see some Digital Turbine folks with us tonight as well. PIMCO, Sana, Charles Schwab, Axiom, Clear Data, BB Imaging, Revel IT, FDM Group, and ShipStation. And we have some goodies from some of these folks tonight as well. So Shay, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Emmy. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you. I wanted to do a quick introduction of how tonight is going to work. We're still going to do our networking practice, but it's going to be just a little bit different this time. So we have three lovely speakers for us this evening who are going to go in order. So each speaker will go. There's going to be a question and answer section, and then there'll be a breakout room with a question that the speaker has come up with us, and we'll do that like we do our normal networking roulette. At the end of each of those speakers, we're also going to be doing drawings, as well as announcing the winners for our longest standing AWT member and our member who had attended the most events last year, or this last year. So we have five gift giveaways total for the entire evening, and we're going to get started here with Ashland Viscosi is our first speaker. She is the founder of Creative Meets Business, which is an event and podcast series based here in Austin, Texas, for creatives of all disciplines to define themselves as artists and creatives and small business owners. The event series helps creatives and anyone wanting to make a living as a maker learn how to become sustainable in their artistic craft. She also hosts, produces, and edits the Creatives Meets Business podcast. Take it away, Ashland.
Thank you so much, Shay. And let me also add to that a little bit, because I was not immune to a pandemic, because none of us were. We were all affected by it in our own different, unique ways. But I did also start working in legal tech. So I'm officially an Austin woman in technology. Woo woo. And other fun fact, I think my boss lady shirt was like the only thing that I had cleaned. So I wore that for like 3 days in a row. So thanks, y'all. Appreciated that one. Okay, can I get my next slide, please? Next slide, please. Actually, leave it on that one for a second, if you don't mind. So really what I wanted to talk about tonight was, how do we leverage what our existing network has inside of it? I think none of us are surprised that 2021 is off to a unique start, given what happened in 2020. We are tired. We are Zoom fatigued. We are legitimately tired from all of the events of what last week was. So really what I wanted to talk about was, how can you understand really what your network is? And I'm going to talk about this in a second. Understand and leverage some of the outskirts of the network that we don't really take advantage of as well. And then also reactivate things that are dormant. Again, because it's hard to meet people. You don't have the ability to just go to an event and talk to people because we can't gather. And then there's also just being tired, and we're spending our time in different ways. We're reconnecting with family. We're being more intentional about our time, just making it a lot harder to network in the traditional sense of what that meant back in 2019 and prior. Okay, next slide. All righty. Oh, I wonder if I can see, I guess I can't see y'all. I was gonna have people raise their hand, but that's not gonna really help, is it? Is there any way I can see you guys? Darn it. Okay, never mind.
You can use the raise hand function on the reactions.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not that big of a show.
Or
But
put it through the chat.
okay, perfect. Okay. If you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard me mention Robin Dunbar and the Dunbar number. If anybody knows what that is, though, please no spoilers, but I am curious. That's why I wanted you to like raise your hand if you could, but I think it's going to be a little too hard to tell. So skip that part. So Robin Dunbar is an anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist, and he actually studied primates and then vampire bats. And what he was trying to figure out ultimately was why on earth is the brain so big and uses so much energy? He learned it all had to do with the size of our social group. Then they extrapolated what was learned about from monkeys and vampire bats to then people. It's very fascinating. So I think we all understand there are limits to networks, especially after what we all just went through last week. We definitely know that networks cannot exceed their capacity. So that actually comes from our brain, and it's the neocortex. It's the cute little squishy part that sits on top of the brain. It actually has a hard limiter on the number of relationships we can hold. So before we go to the next slide, somebody throw in the chat, do you know what that number is? There are varying circles, which I'm going to talk about. The outermost one I will talk about, but what is the main number Robin Dunbar talks about? If anybody knows, I've got the chat open. I'm going to do a little, 200 is really close, Nicole. Katie, 30, pretty close. All right. Nicole, you're the closest. 250 went a little too high there, Russell. Aaron, you got it. Hammer meets nail. Perfect. Okay. Give me the next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to move this chat for a second. 150 is correct. So 150, of course, there's standard deviation. So honestly, the people who said 200, Nicole, you are still very much correct as well, because each person is unique. However, it's really 150 is the meaningful number to remember. So think about it like a series of circles getting more and more intimate. So 150 is the main one to focus on, of course, but there is one wider, which is 1,500. So that is actually the number of names and faces we can recognize. So if you happen to have, say, 1,800 friends on Facebook, have you ever had, I'm curious, maybe throw up your hand actually as a reaction, I'd love to know. Have you ever looked at your Facebook friend list before and you're like, I only friend people I know, but who is this person? I don't know the name. I don't recognize the face. I cannot tell who this person is at all. Okay, I'm getting one yes, literally yes me every day. Amazing. Okay. Anybody else feel like that really represents all the time? Guilty. Yeah, exactly. So don't feel bad about it. Our brain actually has that limitation. So 1,500 is that widest circle out from us. Then we come in and we get closer and closer. So circles getting smaller. So 150 is the most important number, which is really about how expansive your network really is in the end. So 150, imagine if you are at the Austin airport and you see somebody that you know and that you don't feel weird at all. Well, now it's a pandemic. So like, you're not going to just go approach somebody and give them a hug, but let's pretend this is 2019. So if you went up to somebody in the airport, you know them well enough that you could sit at the same table, share a pizza. You're not going to share the same piece of pizza, but you can eat lunch together, gab for a minute, that kind of person. Or maybe it's a bar, you see them at the same space, you walk up and have a few words in a chat. It's more or less somebody you can understand well enough that you think you might know how they would react in a situation. So 150 is actually a pretty fascinating number from both a company perspective and then historically with military sizes and small tribal communities, hunter-gatherer communities. So that number appears a lot. But also in a company, around 150 is when you have to start having some level of organizational structure, because you can't just trust that something is going to be done. You have to hail to the king. All those things happen because you can no longer just trust, and you can't just kind of give somebody a side eye and make something happen. So 150, again, is that really outermost level of our circle. Now, 50, these are your close friends. These are the people that you're probably going to send a Christmas card to. Definitely, if you're having a big enough wedding, you can get 50 of your friends there. Family also counts in these numbers, by the way. So this isn't just your friend group. This is your whole entire network of all of the contacts that you know, FYI. So now we move in a little bit more closely, and we have our sympathy group. This is the shoulders you cry on. This is realistically where your true close friends sit. And then 5 is your innermost circle. So if you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, partner, some sort of romantic entanglement, that person actually takes so much of your time that they actually take the space of 2. So then you only have space for 3 more people. So what's fascinating is 150 is actually not that many. So our networks are a lot smaller than we might think. So it's really more about a curating process of who sits inside of your network. And so the most important thing of where somebody fits inside of your circles, like how you can define where they are and how you feel about them and everything, is all time based. You can actually hit me with that next slide if you'd like. Okay. They are expensive, and I put air quotes around it because I don't mean you have to go buy diamond rings and flowers and chocolates and that kind of expense. These cost you time. You can only have so many relationships, as I just mentioned. So therefore, it's costly to have anybody inside of your circles because they take a lot of your time and energy. Okay, give me my next one, please. Okay. So now we're going to move to weak ties, which these are the people that are going to sit more on that outside of your circle in that really 150, maybe 50 range. So here's where I really wanted to spend a lot of time and energy. First was explaining the network piece. And then this is how do you now network in this weird time that we're living in? So really what I want to advocate for is getting to know better the people on your outside of your periphery and the people that they know. All right, hit me with the next slide. Okay. So this was actually from a study by Mark Granovetter in the 70s. It was called Getting a Job. And so he'd interviewed hundreds upon hundreds of knowledge workers. And nobody in this room, I'm sure, is going to be surprised. And he's not going to win any Nobel Peace Prize or any level of fascinating thing that you would get from laurel that you would get from simply saying that most people got their job because of a personal connection. Well, okay. You submit a resume, like, yeah, okay. I think we all know that having a personal touch is going to help somebody and a job seeker find a job. Okay, cool. The interesting part, though, is not that 56% got it from a personal connection, but how well those people inside of that 56% know each other. So only, I'm just going to say 17%, I'm going to round up a little bit, only 17% saw that contact often, which tells me circle of 50, 15 or 5, but frankly, probably within that 50. So the most 83% are getting their jobs and getting everything else from that outer circle of 150. Does anybody want to give me a guess in the chat on why that might be? There is a third bullet point that might tell you a little something. And it was all about relationships being costly. Anybody want to throw a thought in the chat? Less bias. Interesting. I like that one, Heather. Okay, I'm going to give a second. I'll do a little Bueller action. And frankly, get a sip of water because I think you can all hear that my voice is slipping. All right. Okay. I'll keep going. So it's not quite about bias per se. It's more that the people that we spend our time with don't present new information because we spend our time with them. We know the same people. We watch the same television shows with them. We listen to the same radio station. I mean, obviously not all the time, of course, but we typically know them so well that they're not presenting new information. The people in that 150 on the outside of our network present all kinds of new information. We don't talk to them as often. They have all kinds of other relationships that can be incredibly beneficial. So right now I'm speaking a little hypothetically, but I will move to a real example with this next slide. Okay, so this is a bit of a shout out as well. So Sally is our final speaker and she can tell you a little bit more too about this group if she'd like to. So this would have been in about September. And yeah, it was definitely September. And I don't think her goal was to make a networking group. However, it's a beautiful side effect of what happened from our time together. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg had just passed and a lot of tears were happening. I think all of us you can recognize the contributions that RBG, notorious RBG, had made. And Sally had sent out an email and it was along the lines of, I can't just keep crying about this. We need to do something. And she rallied a group of what became about 8 to 10 of us just to be involved politically and to do something more meaningful with our time because we were just all stewing in a sea of sadness. And so ultimately, and I think she does have more action group. I miss RGB too. Sachi, I miss her so freaking much. Sorry, we should have a little moment for RGB. I got distracted just thinking about how much I love her and think she's amazing. But anyway, Sally might have some more information she can share about the action groups. But ultimately, it was just to give us all a little bit more of a sense of purpose when we all felt like we were failing and flailing a little bit. But what happened is Sally, I do think, is closer to me than on the 150 scale. So full disclosure on that. But I didn't know anybody else in that group. And it was an amazing way to actually meet people because we were gathering for impact. We were trying to do something meaningful with our time, but it actually gained all of us and we grew together and we became much closer and it was amazing. And there was all kinds of vulnerability and authenticity. It was very lovely. And we still actually gather virtually, I should say. But also it adds a lot of value to Sally, the organizer who put something like that together. She's now more in my thoughts. I think about her more frequently. I want to add value back to her. So all this to say, this is something that you could be thinking of inside of your circles as well. You could also be that source to help connect people that may be disparate from different backgrounds. There could be something that they're connected in some node, and you can also be that person to help connect. So that's just one thing I wanted to share was a real meaningful example. Okay, next slide. Okay, dormant ties. You can go ahead with the next slide, please. Okay, I really loved that picture. I can't see your faces, but I really hope there's some smiles happening. So what dormant ties are, and this is something that you could do tonight if you wanted to, and it is going to be the topic of our breakout question. So love you, no phone, who dis? So what dormant ties are, whenever I mentioned those circles, again, 150, 50, 15, 5, when people move inside of the circles, because they're living, breathing things, networks are alive. Well, I shouldn't probably say breathing, but they're composed of living beings, which is humans. So therefore, I guess they're breathing. But really, your network that you had in middle school, it's not the same network that you have today. It grows, evolves, it changes, it makes space for one person and kicks out another because we can only hold 150 meaningfully. So that means people tend to fall outside of our circles. So again, since they move and people move within them, somebody can move from 5, move outside. Somebody who's not as close to you now, but will someday be, can move from 150 down to 5. But dormant ties are really what's happened when somebody has fallen out entirely. And so dormant ties are an amazing place for you to start right now. Why it's great to start now is because you still have trust in the relationship, assuming it's something that ended well. If it's something like a terrible situation, probably best not to reactivate, let sleeping dogs lie and all. But if it was a good relationship and just life happened, or you had a kid, or you got a new job, or you moved, because things happen, it's fine. Reach back out. Trust is still there. They can add insights. They can add all kinds of value because they also already trust and care about you as a person. I am butchering the quote. I think Sally knows it probably perfectly. It's Maya Angelou, and it's around, the notion is basically that you will forget what people said and did, but you'll remember how they made you feel. So that is something to hold on to when you're thinking about dormant ties. You remember having positive sentiment toward a person. So that is still there. And then you can reactivate. And what's amazing is in the time that they were no longer inside of your circle and you were no longer inside of theirs, they gained new skills and relationships and can see an issue or a challenge or whatever it is that you're experiencing with new eyes and fresh perspective, and do so in a way that really fosters and cares for you. Okay, last slide, which I believe is my wrap-up slide. I tried to keep this to 15 minutes. I should have timed myself. So takeaways, quick points, just in summation. Networks have limits, but it's actually our brains that have limits. Leverage the weak ties, leverage the people on the outside of those circles to help you in some capacity, or look at your own weak ties, actually map it out and see what kind of value you might be able to add. Third and almost final, reactivate dormant ties. And then the last thing, I kind of bring this in as a random aside, frankly. Zoom fatigue. I think we can get a little tired of Zoom. It's a little inhuman, not knowing, do I look here? Do I look here? Do I look at my face? Am I just seeing how my hair looks? Like, what am I actually looking at in Zoom? Try a phone call instead. It's actually far more connecting than I find a lot of video formats to be. I believe that's all I've got. Oh, and one other thing too, breakout sessions are brilliant. It's an amazing way to connect with people, love it. And different virtual events that probably use Hop-in or different things that actually activate people to connect. Chat's lovely, but you can also get a couple or 5 minutes or so of just little micro conversations with people, which is really helpful to look for. All right, I believe that's it because I think my last slide is questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashland. Invite everyone to ask any questions that they have. You can either unmute yourself and ask Ashland directly, or you can throw it through the chat and I will read it off for you.
Good evening. I just want to say thank you for y'all allowing me to be part of the secret society tonight. I think I'm the only guy that's on here. So I'm just grateful to be here. So quick question for you. So when you say a phone call as opposed to a Zoom call, you know, when I think about, you know, I think in person is probably the best form of communication because you can read body language and tone and intonation, all those other kinds of things. But are you saying a phone call better than a Zoom video call like we're doing right now?
Well, for one-on-one style connecting, yes. If you're doing something where it might be 3 to 4 of you and you're kind of doing a virtual happy hour, feel free to use Zoom. But I do honestly think that phone calls are more connective. You can't actually see the person, which makes you almost like when you're reading a book versus watching a movie, and it comes to life as you read it. I've actually felt way more connected to people and friends via phone calls than I have with Zooms.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But that also might be more with your friends per se, but I've enjoyed them much more than Zooms of late. Yes.
I wanted to ask about the numbers again.
Yeah.
I know you said everybody's a little bit different, but I find that I tend to have a lot more connections than my husband.
Okay.
For example. And I'm wondering if there's any sort of gender lines with that, because I've noticed that with a lot of my male friends seem to have like a couple close ones, and they don't seem to be, I don't know, as social as I am. And I'm wondering if there's anything around that.
Well, there is not so much around the numbers. That tends to hold fairly true because it's also your work colleagues. It's also a lot of other things. Maybe it's soccer leagues or other different things. But yes, hear you on females may have what seems like a broader and wider social network. There's probably some truth to that. But no, according to Robin Dunbar, it's pretty consistent on a gender spectrum. And even too with things like social media, it still holds true to be around 150. But what is interesting is it's pretty fascinating. So men stay better connected when they have very short phone calls with each other, more like logistics of like, hey, and again, this is all pre-COVID. So like, let's pretend this is the normal time still. So you could just like, hey, meet at the pub. Great. Okay. They're in 10, right? And that is actually more connected for the relationship if that kind of communication is short and in person is longer. Women.
That's true. That's true. I verify that.
So women actually thrive when we have more phone time with our friends, but when we're together in person with our friends, the relationship starts to deteriorate. So it's a pretty funny flip-flop there. But
I'm curious what the guys talk about when they actually get to the pub.
well, we've got one person here who can speak to that better than I can, for sure.
Everything. I want to build on that question just a little bit, Ashland,
Sure.
and that is, what about introverts versus extroverts? Do you see statistic differences there?
So again, I feel like introversion and extroversion is also more of a how we hold our energy, because you can be gregarious and be an introvert, that type of thing. So no, the numbers are still pretty true, but you might not, even though your brain can handle it, you might not take your network to the full potential and full capacity. So yes, that's very possible and true. Yeah, it's a limit. It doesn't mean that we always get to that.
I'm sitting here thinking that I must be wired more like men, because I despise getting on phone calls and I'm the worst at responding to text messages. So I'm known around in my social circles that I will not pick up a phone and have a hard time getting back over text messages, and everyone's accepted that. But no, I just think it's interesting.
Hey, you just got to train them. Yeah. That's awesome. Anybody else have any other questions?
I had a question about the dormant relationships. Is there a time when it's gone dormant for so long that you can consider the relationship maybe like that trust is kind of worn out and you have to rebuild it back up again?
I wouldn't say that's more time-based. That would probably be more if something strange happened in the relationship that would have caused a rift in the first place. And then maybe the passage of time and you've kind of forgotten what that thing was, but you might still have that sentiment of like, what was it that happened with that person? But for the most part, we tend to remember the people who have treated us poorly or negatively. So that tends not to be the case. I wouldn't be worried about it on the time perspective because that trust is still probably there, but they might Yeah, I do hear what you're saying, and they might not remember who you are, but I think that sentiment would still be there. If it was a close relationship or close-ish in the first place, if you barely knew each other in the first place and you had 12 words together at South by, no, nothing's going to stick from that.
Like, I don't need to remember, every 3 months, make sure to reach out just to keep the connection.
No. But your network will change over time. And so if you don't communicate with somebody for long periods, yeah, they might drift off, but they can come back in because, again, it is more of a living, breathing thing than it is something fixed in time and stone.
Do you have any tips or suggestions for how to reach out to those dormant ties so that you don't, I don't know, I can imagine myself feeling and being very awkward, even if I want to reconnect with them and not knowing what to say?
Yeah, totally. Well, it depends on, were you close enough to have cell phone numbers, email addresses, all that type of thing, presuming you have to at least have an email address for somebody to be that level of close to you. So I'm presuming those things. Phone call and leave a message, or an email or a text. But frankly, if it was me, if it's somebody that I know pretty well and haven't talked to in a long time, phone call, leave a voice message. They don't get back to me, message received. Email, that would be more of a, I was thinking about you the other day. I saw an article about Daft Punk, and I know how much you used to love them, and they just broke up. Just wanted to check in and see how things are going for you. Something like that. It can be really anything, but any level of shared connectivity that there might be, use that as your leverage point and your introduction to talking again. R.I.P. Daft Punk. Yeah, feel you, Heather.
So my question was, you can give us those numbers and we can think about who's in each of those categories, but you probably know the names and have a list of everybody in each of your 5, 15, 150.
Yeah.
Is that a good idea or not a good idea?
So it is, I teach a 2-hour version of this. So there's actually a lot more that goes into the curriculum. And so that is actually something we do in class, or that you start on, and then you finish it in your own time, because that would take a long time to actually look through and figure that out. I actually don't have mine printed out. So the answer to that one is no, but I do know who's in my 50, 15, and 5. Yeah. And it's also just almost look at your cell phone history and you can get a good sense of who sits inside of your networks. Who do you spend your time with? Spend your time with and spend your time on. It's probably a good way to frame it too. I love that mug, by the way. It is so cool. It's so cute. Loving that. All right. Anybody else?
Any last questions? Okay, so we're going to jump into our first breakout room. CEO and founder of Templeton and Associates. She's a professional speaker, certified executive coach, business strategist, consultant, trainer, and author. Darlene specializes in leadership and transformation for corporations and professionals, specifically those who want to make a greater impact personally and professionally. Darlene's unique experience, combination of experience, or corporate experience, her own personal career journey, and her successful coaching and speaking business have given her the ability to work with individuals, small businesses, and Fortune 100 companies to help them define their goals, enhance their performance, and put an action plan in place to achieve the results they desire. Take it away, Darlene.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Shay. And my apologies, I was actually texting someone that's trying to get in. So thank you, Heather, for sending it to Susan Fern. I said, I'm getting ready to speak, but we'll get it to you. Oh my gosh, y'all. It's so good to see you. Thank you, Emmy, Shay, and the entire board. I love this group. And Russell, we love that you've joined us. Thank you for being our amazing ally. So ladies, it's Gal-entine's, and I know it's been a crazy and exhausting few weeks. I mean, it seems like it's been much longer than a week. I don't know how y'all feel. It just seems like it's been a long, long time ago. I am so excited to talk to y'all tonight. And I just want to share something. So don't be writing these numbers down, okay? I worked at IBM don't write them down or I'll know. I worked at IBM for 36 years. And yes, I was 6 when I started. And I've been in this corporate world for 50 years and I was 6. So don't anybody think any different, okay? So there's not much I haven't seen, been through, done, or said, but I'll tell you, the pandemic and this 100-year storm is all new news to me. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about how can we continue, and Ashland, I love what you said, how do we get around obstacles and how do we get past some things to leverage our network? I'm going to talk to you tonight about what I've learned. I speak a lot, and the biggest program that I'm asked, I've been doing it, this is like the 12th or 14th time, confidence through chaos. Because nobody knows how to do this. Anybody here want to be more confident? Raise your hand. Anybody a little crazy with this Zoom and all this stuff about how do I connect? Zoom fatigue. There's a lot of stuff going on that's not normal. And I'm not even counting last week. Okay, this is pre last week because that was truly not normal. So tonight I want to talk about how my formula, it's my secret formula. And if you share it, I'll have to get my guys after you on this because it's a very secret formula that I've learned over the last 50 years. And whoever said that they didn't like texting, raise their hand. I think it was Aaron Richardson. Don't text me, and Shay, don't text me, and Emmy can vouch for this. Don't text me more than and Debbie Chilton, anything that needs more than a 2 or 3 sentence answer, don't text it because I'll just pick the phone up and call you because it's hard to text a long text with one thumb, right? It's very hard to do that. So what I want to do, and I'm just going to preface this just a little bit. I remember a time when there weren't so many distractions, and I worked from home with IBM for 12 years before all this, and early before working remote was the thing to do. I worked for 12 years, so that was pretty different, but we were on conference calls. It's now very different where we get to see each other. But what I want to do and ask you tonight, give yourself some grace and give others grace. I love that our dogs are here. I love that our children are in. My cat's locked away because she's biting, okay? But she's Miss Zoom Queen. And I love that we can become so much more vulnerable in creating those relationships. And oh, by the way, that allows us to create better networks, to reach out and be more confident. Does anybody remember when distractions were not nearly like they are today? Raise your hand. Okay, if you do. So I'm going to ask you, don't count the snowstorm, please. What was your biggest distraction before the snowstorm during COVID? Just drop your biggest distraction in the chat if you would. I'd love to know what that is. I've done this like 15 times, so I'd love to know what your biggest distraction was. Yes, children, my partner. Yes, self-talk. By the way, I had to go ask my husband to please leave the room because he was too loud in the living room. Chat messages, my yard work, absolutely. Being in the same room, I asked him very quietly. I said, John, please talk quietly. Why? He's in there yelling. I'm like, John, please quietly. Okay, dogs, exactly. And then bad space and moving, exactly. And the other thing that I've heard is children that are in school, that's been the biggest thing, workspace limited in the house. Workspace. I'll tell you, there's a woman that was running a multi-million-dollar company. She jumped on a Zoom like this and she was so frustrated. She said, I run a huge business. I have no place in this house to work. My kids are upstairs. My college daughter is downstairs and my husband's in the kitchen. And I'm standing in the foyer holding my PC. What is wrong with this picture? So those are all the distractions. And then everybody talks about the new normal. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what that new normal is. I talk about the next normal, okay? Don't talk about the new normal. Talk about the next normal. And is anybody sick of the word pivot? Oh, if anybody says to me again, pivot, I'm just going to go. If you're sick of the word pivot, please put yes, yes, yes in the chat. If anybody tells me I need to pivot my business, how can I pivot, 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 pivot? So I've made up a new word. It's called swizzle. Okay, swizzle, 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 swizzle. When I think of pivot, I think, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, right, left, upside down, got it, okay? When I think of swizzle, I can swizzle this way, I can swizzle back, I can swizzle a little bit, and I can even dance, woohoo, if I want to swizzle. So start thinking about swizzling because we know we're going to have to make changes, okay? Swizzle, swizzle, swizzle. I want to chat with you about something else. In times where they're this crazy, we forget to trust our gut, okay? We forget to trust ourselves. And just because of COVID and now Snowvid is what some people are calling it, I don't even know what to call it, but just because of that doesn't mean we can't trust ourselves, okay? So I want you to start thinking about, and I want you to drop one thing in the chat for me. What do you think your strongest leadership skill is? What do you think that would be? Your strongest leadership skill, and those of you that know me, I've asked you, I see you smiling, Susan Fern and Debbie Chilton and Emmy, because I know I've asked y'all a million times. connecting, patience, me. Oh my gosh. Emmy, did you send them my stuff? Look at this: curiosity, confidence, planning, delegation. Yes, look at this: trust, collaboration. Just because we're in COVID, those skills don't go away. So don't lose those skills. Our skills are transferable during any kind of pandemic. I call it the pandemic, not pandemic. Team building, honesty, support, grace. I love that, especially last week. Diane, so true. There were moments I was like, is grace left for any of us right now? But yes. So anyway, think about that. And when you feel a little unconfident, and when you've been on Zoom calls all day and you're exhausted and Zoom fatigue, think about that skill, because that's what people look for you to do. Trust your gut and trust yourself. After 36 years at IBM and 50 years in the business world, every time I didn't trust myself, it came back to bite me. I had to fire somebody. The project didn't do as it was supposed to do. Who knows? So I've learned to trust my gut. So if you don't know anything, oh my gosh, y'all are so, Debbie, thank you. That's why we have you, to get us back up. Woo! Yes, ma'am. Let's everybody take a minute and give me a big woohoo. 1, 2, 3. Woo! Come on, that was a week. Woo! 1, 2, 3. Woo! 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 So what I'm going to do tonight is share with you my big secret formula. And honestly, it's a formula. I've already told you about Swizzle. I've already told you about Next Normal. I'm sharing all my stuff with them. This is awesome. But what I want you to think about, and Ashland talked about it, who's someone that's dormant? Who haven't you connected with? And because we're starved, I'm a screaming extrovert. Can anybody tell that? I'm a screaming extrovert. If you think I'm not, I just want to reach out right now and hug you. Y'all are all too young, but there's the Southwestern Bell. Y'all don't even remember Southwestern Bell. It's been AT&T since all of y'all are alive. But there's an amazing, I actually am going to put it on Facebook. I should have used it tonight. There's an amazing commercial out there, and they have this big white phone that y'all don't remember, or receiver on it, and she's got it like that, and it's got her grandkids on the other side, and it's going, reach out and touch someone, make someone's day. That's not, I love it, Russell. You're not that old. Your grandmother must have played it. But anyway, reach out and touch people. Right now, we need that human contact. That's what we're begging for. I love it. Oh, the E.F. Hutton. I love that one. I forgot about that. Thank you. And just remember, reach out. And what Ashland said about sometimes calling, just call sometimes, because sometimes when we text or send email, we're not displaying what we really mean. It's hard sometimes to see that. So now this is how to be more confident in a virtual space. And this is how I want you to think about it. And tonight I want to put a little different spin on because of where we are. Just a second, my phone decided to die on me. There we go. A little bit different spin on where we are. Because we need so much support from last week, people are still dealing with this stuff. I know you're exhausted, you're tired, you're cranky. You know, sometimes all I want to do is keep my pajamas on all day. I can't believe I'm saying this. I say it every time. Keep my pajamas all day and watch Netflix. And I never used to watch Netflix. And you know what? That's okay to do that. But Emmy said it earlier. Come to these meetings and get energized, because sometimes it's easy to hibernate. Come and join us so we can get kind of energized again. So there's 4 things I want you to write this down. Show up, okay? And I know many of you are not on camera tonight, because one woman said she had kids and dogs and everybody's barking in the back. Show up, put your beautiful and handsome faces on the camera so I can see you. I can see you when you laugh. I can see you when you're hanging out. I can see you when you go, oh my God, there she goes again, that crazy woman doing woohoo. So I can see you there, but show up. And I'll tell you why. I'm used to being in front of lots and lots of people. And I want to make sure that oh my gosh, you're eating, Tammy. Can we come to dinner? I love it. Thank you for showing up. What are you having? But I love that. And let's talk about that. Let's show up. People know your folk. Don't keep eating. Don't stop. No, keep your plate. Don't stop because I said that. Please don't. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I wanted to let you know I'm proud of you for doing that. We show up as we are, okay? I see you. So me tonight. I'm eating a cup of noodles. Woo! I had chocolate earlier. So show up. Show people that you can participate on their meetings with the dogs, with our dinner, with our drinks, with our candy. Show up and engage. Let me see your face. I'm going to tell you one thing. I was on a meeting. This never would have happened before COVID. I was on a meeting and I swear there were 40 women. It was a women's group, and a woman executive, high-level, C-level executive was on there. She was kind of running the call. We're talking about house shoes and what do you have on your feet, and that most of us were barefooted. That never would have gone on. And by the way, it was a great call because we see we're all normal. We see we're all the same. So write this down. Show up. Cameras when you can. The next one is speak up. And for those of you that are not screaming extroverts like me, speak up. Decide what you want to take to the meeting and how you want to speak up, okay? So speak up, get some planning going, figure out what you're doing, ask questions and be curious, okay? So you want your voice heard, and too often we just sit here like this and we don't talk. Get your voice heard, and if you're not sure, think about a question. And if you don't know what to ask, say, you know what? Can you give me a little more information on this subject so I can see and hear you? Because you want to be heard. We all do. Okay. You know, and Ashland said it. Maya Angelou said, you won't remember what you said. You won't remember what you did. People will remember how you made them feel. So make yourself feel there and let me and the speaker see you. The next one is connect up. Okay. I want y'all to have homework tonight. Connect with at least 2 people. Make a date with 2 people on this Zoom tonight. 2. Find them in the text. Find them on. Just take 2 names down. Get them in your breakout rooms. Connect, connect, connect. Learn about them. And it doesn't have to be a business connection. It could be that I say to Tracy, I see a beautiful art picture on a picture behind you. Where did you get that? I love that. Connect, connect, connect. Because right now we are craving, and these extroverts like me and the introverts are craving connection. And the last one is follow up. Okay. Follow up, because too many people today, and we're all busy, but take that moment to support yourself, especially when times are as crazy as they are right now. What are you going to do to support yourself? I talk a lot about self-care, and I really want you to think when you go into your breakouts tonight, what are you going to talk about, and what is one of the things you're going to do about self-care and how you're going to show up? And that means showing up personally for you. So what I want you to do is remember, I'm going to leave you with something in a second. Remember to show up, remember to speak up, remember to connect up, remember to follow up, and remember what you are so strong as a leader, and carry that through your life tonight. I've given you my special formula, and tonight when we go out to breakouts, think about something that you've learned today, and it may be what Ashland said, go find a dormant contact, but find a contact, follow up. What are you going to do to show up better, and make 2 dates tonight? Because if you don't, I will know. Okay. So we've got a little bit of time for questions. So does anybody have any questions?
Feel free to unmute or send them through the chat.
Yeah, send them through the chat or just unmute. Don't be bashful, because I'll come after you. Anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, I have a question too. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Go, Miss Megan, you're first. Go.
Okay, so how do you decide who you want to make a date with?
So sometimes I just look around and I go, oh gosh, there's Megan. I don't know her. I'm going to have a date with her. Or it's somebody that I met in the breakout room. Sometimes it's just random, you know, and there's no rhyme or reason, just do it. But you sometimes feel that connection, and sometimes you can feel it in the breakout room. But it may be that Russell's the only guy here tonight. So Russell, you better be careful. You may get a lot of dates tonight. So it's kind of random, Megan. Does that help? Does that help?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about dating in general, and I'm like, that was really hard. Like, I don't want to go back to that.
No. Megan, make this easy. I call it 2 dates just because it's kind of fun. Make 2 coffees. How's that? 2 coffee or wines. Is that better? Good. Okay. And then Diane, was it you? Thank you for that question. Was it you that had a question? Somebody else had a question.
Yeah, I had a question. So initially you were saying to show up. So I don't have my camera on right now, but you also said to turn your camera on to show up. How does that really relate?
Well,
because I think that I did show up here, but I don't think having your camera on really has to do with showing up. Considering what Ashland said earlier, that a phone call is a little more intimate than having your camera on. I would think that my showing up really has to just do with being a part of this.
Well, and Roshni, that's a great question. Yes, being a part of this is extremely important. And thank you for doing that. I just like to see your faces so I get to know you. And that's probably my own preference, but I'm getting a lot of response from people that say they just like to see who's on. And maybe you only show it for a few minutes so we can make a connection. Because if we were in the same room, I could see your face. Does that help? That's the only reason for me, is to make a connection, a different level of connection.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Does that make sense? Thank you for that question. Okay. Who else?
I think that also connects to the next part where you said to speak up, because I'm kind of doing both in one right now. Would you agree?
I agree. And I thank you for being so brave on that, because it is the truth. You're doing both. You're speaking up, and you asked that question, which was an excellent question. And again, it may not be possible, or you just may not want to do it. But if you speak up, then you're still working through that and showing up. So I appreciate that, Rosny. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Roshni, did I say it right, Roshni?
It's Roshni. Yeah.
Roshni.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else have any more questions? Anything else in the chat?
Yeah, we asked a question through the chat, which was, how do you stay on top of following up?
I make a list. I'm an old-fashioned kind of girl. So tonight I would make a list of who, and then I would follow up, and it would say AWT Gal-entine's follow up. And that's how I do it. I would write down, and then I always write down the names of the people that I'm in the breakout rooms, and then I connect with them on LinkedIn. Okay, so that's another way to stay connected. Write down who you're in with and connect. Again, that keeps you connected. And then back to Roshni's point, you can connect at that point however you want to. Okay.
I have a cheat for this. I used to do this for after our in-person events. I've not been so great with it for our virtual events. But when I would sign up for an event like this, I would block out time on my calendar the next day, like in the morning. I'd give myself 30 minutes. And I would put on there, it's follow up after whatever, so that I'd already made space for it, right? And so it's just part of, it's just part of my registration process, right? So that's how I did it, so that you already made time and space and you gave yourself a reminder. So that was my cheat.
And I love that, Emmy, because that is so important to make time, because if you don't do it right after, then we move on to the next meeting. And Emmy asked me a question because Eleanor Roosevelt is my favorite shero, and I'm going to just give a quote because I always leave a quote. I'll leave you with another quote in a minute. But no one can take away your self-esteem or your confidence. I added it and changed it unless you let them. And that's why this is so important, to get back your confidence when we're all exhausted. We're COVID fatigued, Zoom fatigued, and now we're whatever storm fatigued. So just remember, don't let people take your confidence away. Okay, anybody else have any questions? We have just a few more, a minute or two. Don't be bashful. Does this help? Okay. Oh my gosh, I think as a presenter, you teach college, it's hard, Joy, I see that. You got to give a choice to whether you do an icebreaker or a check-in. I ask them to share their camera and then they can decide. One thing is to have people write in the chat. I love that. So I use chat, same thing, chat, camera, breakout, conversation, raise hands. I do everything that I can to get you. And I think, Shay, how much more time do we have? Do we need to go into breakouts?
Whatever. Yeah, we can.
Okay. Does anybody have another question?
Yes, questions?
Any questions or comments?
No, thank you, Darlene. This would be my last session because I have to bounce out. But I would tell you that that's one of the things I teach my children is sometimes your best ability is your availability.
Yes.
And I tell them that, my son is a big basketball fan, and you could have the greatest athlete that's out there, and if he or she is always hurt and always on the bench and never available, then what's the use? Where's the value in them? Right. But if you're always available, you always have an opportunity to be out there. So your best ability is your availability.
I love that, Russell. And tonight I want you, when you go on your breakout rooms, to think about one thing that you're going to take away, whatever it is, one thing that you're going to take away from tonight to start doing within a week, which is called your wow. Within 1 week, what are you going to do within a week? I want to leave you with something, and I just want you to please hear this. If you're always trying to be normal, and who knows what normal is, you will, this is a Maya Angelou, you will never know how amazing you are. So find that place, whatever normal, whatever your new normal, your next normal, whatever that feels like, be your authentic, amazing self, and you will always be successful. I'm so excited. I can't wait to be in breakout rooms with you. So one more thing I'm gonna leave you with. My 3-year-old's granddaughter, it was in Montessori, and she said, Nana, I beautiful, I smart, and I unique. And she said, who told you that? She said, my teacher, Miss Debbie. She said, I beautiful. So I want to leave you with something, and I changed it just a little bit. You're beautiful, you're handsome, you're smart, you're unique, and you're amazing. Woo! And don't ever forget it. Thank you all so much. Woo! Let's go to breakout. See you there. Thanks.
Time through transition and change, from life events to organizational shifts to leadership evolutions. She helps her clients to see opportunities that can come from change, including more creativity, clarity, deeper relationships, and connections. Take it away, Sally.
Cool, thank you. Wow, following up behind Ashland and Darlene is a lot. So I'm gonna do my best to keep things moving, but thanks y'all for being here again. I know as we move through the evening, even it's a lot. So thank you for being here and for being a part of this. I don't see my slides right now. Does anyone else see them? I love the beach scene though. I'm kind of wishing I was sitting on a beach somewhere, but do we see my slides?
No, we don't see them. We see the beach.
Oh, okay. Well,
can you share, are you sharing your screen?
Well, while we're finding my slides, I will say Ashland did a really beautiful job talking about the little group that that I created a few months ago, kind of in a moment of kind of craziness. And I guess one of the things I'll add to her description, which was really spot on, it really turned into such a beautiful little group. And I was really the only connector for everyone in the group, but we also all came around very similar, a really similar theme, right? We were all looking for a way to connect to other people who felt what we were feeling. And we also wanted to do something. And so we supported each other in doing something. And we talked about what made it hard and why it was hard to act sometimes, and why sometimes it was a challenge to do the things that we wanted to do. And so what we were able to talk about our family, we were able to talk about just fears of stepping up and stepping out and doing things we'd never done before, and kind of were able, even in a virtual way, to kind of hold each other's hand to doing something that we've never done. And I think everyone in the group did something leading up to the end of the year and to the election that they had never done before, which I think is pretty cool. So, and the fact that we continue to support each other and ask questions and share resources has been a really cool thing for that group. So that is a really great way. I highly recommend it to bring people together and expand your network that way. So, but now we're going to dive a little bit, maybe go a little bit deeper and a little bit more maybe practical, and give you some practical tips on how we've talked about kind of networking in general. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about really kind of specifically, how do you get ready for those kind of conversations? And then what do you actually say when it comes time to have that conversation? Next slide, please. So this was supposed to be Gal-entines. It feels like a million years ago already, but happy Gal-entines, y'all. Next slide. So oftentimes when we think about networking, that's kind of a dirty word, and it's not something that we necessarily want to do, or it sounds like it's really difficult. And I think right now, because things have changed so much, I think we really have an opportunity to really kind of get beyond what makes networking gross, and really start thinking about networking as really about relationship building, and really as a chance to get to know people and to really expand that network that Ashland was talking about earlier in a way that's really meaningful and can feel really good. When you look through that Facebook list, you're going to see the people that you don't know, but you're also going to think about the people you know. And if you've had a chance to have really good, interesting, positive conversations with them, it's going to make it that much more meaningful for you when you go through that. Yay, I'm seeing some love for Esther Perel. I love her too. She is amazing. If you don't know her, she's a therapist. She's incredibly smart. She talks a lot about relationships, both intimate relationships and work relationships. She has a really cool podcast that I love called How's Work? And she talks about relationships in the workplace. And just because you're at work doesn't mean that you don't have meaningful relationships with people you work with, and sometimes difficult relationships. And so she she helps as a therapist. She sits down and you get to kind of listen in on her conversations. But one of the things that she talks about is that questions are the key to creating closeness. So if there is someone you're trying to get to know in a closer way, questions are the way you get there. And of course, she's a therapist, so she would say that. So next slide, please. So as you're getting ready to go into a situation where you're going to be having an opportunity to meet people, how do you prepare and how do you get ready for that conversation? What's the actual process look like? So the first thing you want to do is obviously do some prep. First, think about what you want to know. So when you're thinking about other people, what is it that you want to know about them? Do you want to understand them better? What kinds of things do you want to know? And I think particularly relevant for us in some ways is, what are their pain points? What are the things that you might be able to help them with? I've already heard a lot of that in this group tonight of, oh, well, we're hiring. Oh, well, I'm looking, let's make that connection. And so how can you kind of get to know what people are struggling with and then find out if there's a way that you can help them with the things that they're struggling with. This other point is really important. And I think sometimes we overlook it. You want to know what's interesting to you. You should have already done your reflection before you come into a networking opportunity to really understand, what do you care about? What's exciting? What do you want to know more about? I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but it's important to be grounded in what's interesting to you so that you don't find yourself in sort of a situation where you're in a conversation you don't want to be in because you don't care about the topic. You should be able to kind of go in knowing what you want to talk about. And then be really clear about what you want to do when you go into that opportunity or you're talking to folks. Is it a self-promotion opportunity? And that's not a bad thing. I think sometimes as women particularly, we think of self-promotion as being gross or being difficult or being something we shouldn't do. And I've struggled with that myself in my business life. And I think the reality is that it's not actually that hard. I think what's hard is when we come in and we're not sure that this is the right place or this is something we really want to do or should we do it or not. When you come in and you're not sure, then that's where it feels super awkward and you don't know what to say and you don't know if it's the right time. And so you kind of halfway do it, or you do it in a way that feels awkward, and then that makes it that much worse. And then you don't want to do it anymore because it feels so bad. And so just knowing before you go in that, yes, this is the time for me to really talk about something that is important to me, or I have a new program that I'm launching, or my company is about to launch into a new space and I want to be able to talk about that. That's great. That's awesome. That's a really important thing that people need to know about. Be ready to go in and step in and do that. Or maybe you just want to go in and meet people and get to know them and learn about their beliefs and their values and their pain points. So really think about what your purpose is, and then be clear when you walk in the door what kinds of conversations you want to have, and really own that and be ready ahead of time. Okay, step 2. And the other thing to be thinking about, and sort of just to have in the back of your mind, is that there are actually different types of questions. And you probably already know this intuitively, but you may not have actually thought about it directly. So one type of question is really just the open-ended question. And this is a great way to get a conversation going. You want to ask something that makes people say more than just yes or no. Like, keep them from just sort of grunting out an answer, but make them give you a sentence or at least a phrase to kind of get the conversation going. So a lot of times those start with a how or a why. Those are good ways to kind of get the conversation going. But now sometimes you want to ask a more closed question. You want them to go ahead and wrap it up. Or maybe you need to get some information really quickly and then move on. And so you can ask really quick questions that will also keep the conversation moving because you'll be able to get the information you need really quickly. And then finally, there's also leading questions. So if you have a question that you're trying to get them to see something, or you're trying to get them to make a decision, or you're trying to get them to go to a certain place, then you might use leading questions to sort of get them to finally make that decision. I recently did a version of this same training for a group of realtors. And so we're talking about, like, sometimes you need them to make a decision. Are they interested in this house, or are they not interested in this house? And so asking the kinds of questions that you know will lead them to make a decision. Not that you're leading them to make a certain decision, mind you, but that you're just trying to get them to make the decision so that you can move on. So it's also important to sort of think about what you want when you're asking the question, and then ask the appropriate question for what you're looking for. Okay, next. Step 2, go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead and just jump in there and ask your question. And just be aware that you are looking either to confirm what you already know to be true, or maybe you're going to get challenged. And so really paying attention and being ready for kind of whatever happens. The most important thing is something that I alluded to earlier, though, is don't ask a question that you don't really care about. We've all been in that kind of situation where someone asks you a question and then you start to you think about it and you start to answer it and you're being thoughtful and you can tell that they could not care less what you have to say, right? We've all been in that situation. Don't be that girl, right? Don't ask something that you don't actually want to know the answer to. So only ask questions that you're actually curious about. And we'll get in a little more in a minute about what that looks like, but only talk about things that you're actually curious about. Okay, so you've asked your question and then we go to step 3. Which is, okay, you've asked your question, now take a little moment and step back. Take a sip of whatever you're holding, give people a chance to answer you. If you've asked a really good question, then it should kind of catch people off guard. They shouldn't have their ready response ready to go. And it's okay if there's a moment of quiet while they think and they collect their thoughts and then they tell you. So take a moment and very intentionally give them some space to think and then be ready to listen and really listen to what they have to say. And then we move on to the last step, which is, or the second to last step actually, which is to stay curious. One of the most powerful tools that you can use if you're really trying to connect with someone in an environment like this is use the follow-up question. Let them know that you really heard them and that you're really interested in what they have to say next. And I wanted to share this in particular because these days, we often find ourselves, or it feels like more often, we find ourselves in difficult conversations. You may ask a question and you may get a response that was not what you were anticipating. And maybe it feels it's a little contentious, or maybe you're not really sure what to say because it wasn't what you were expecting. The follow-up question can be a really great stalling technique. It can be a great way to give yourself a little space to kind of regroup and collect and really have a chance to learn more about what they said, so you know that you're reacting to what they actually meant and not just what you think you heard from that first comment. So the follow-up question can be a really great way to kind of help diffuse a situation, let someone know you're listening and you care about what they think, but also gives you a little bit of chance to kind of take a breather and get a little bit of clarity around where you want to go next with the conversation. And then you can move to the next step, which is step 5, which is ending it well. And this is a really important part. And we've already talked about this a little bit. Darlene did a really nice job of kind of opening up that question of what do you do at the end? And it's important to know when you go into these to remember to wrap up the conversation and to have some sort of follow-up. Even if you're in a breakout room and it closes before you have a chance to say what it's going to be, if you've written down their name, you link with them on LinkedIn, or maybe you find some way to talk to them, you want to be sure that you're kind of clear on what you're going to do, know what you're going to do, whether it's I keep business cards. I think somebody mentioned this in the chat. I keep back in the day, I'd get business cards and I keep them on my desk next to my computer until I did whatever follow-up I was going to do. And then I could put them away or, add them to my address book and then throw them out. But I kept them until I made sure that I had done something with them. And I love the suggestion of putting it on your calendar, adding it to your to-do list as soon as you can. And one of the other things that I think we talk about a lot is this idea of having an elevator pitch, right? But we don't talk very often about an elevator question. So once you've given your pitch, once you've said what you need to say, if you're doing some self-promotion, what is your question at the end? How are you going to follow up with them? So is it okay if I invite you to our next meeting? Or I'd love to see if you might be interested in being on my committee. Can I let you know when our next meeting is, right? Or can I share with you this article that I found, or whatever it is that you want to do? Can I connect you with someone? Can I follow up with you about job opportunity, whatever that might look like? What are you going to ask of them so that you have a reason to come back and be able to further the relationship, further the conversation? Next slide. Okay, so now that you have an idea of what the process looks like, what does it actually mean? Like, what are some actual good questions? What are some actual words that you can use to ask the kind of questions that allow people to really tell you more about who they are and what's important to them? So I came up with this acronym to remember as you go into these conversations that asking good questions is spiffy. I don't think we use that word enough. So asking good questions is spiffy. So what does that mean? The S in spiffy is for story. And this is really one of my most favorite things. When you ask people and they tell you something about themselves, you can use the story to to get them to tell you more. So you want to really kind of take that opportunity to have them reflect a little bit and then tell you something. So ask them what was strange or funny. Ask them what was the most memorable thing and why. As I mentioned earlier, don't ask people for things that you don't care about or you're not interested in. I love food. I love to talk about food. I love to hear about food. I love to try new food. So I love to ask people, you know, what's the best thing that you've eaten? You know, if they talk about a trip they went on, what's the best meal that you had, right? People's eyes light up. They love to talk about food. So that's a great question. Or, you know, people are cooking all the time. Yes, somebody said, what do you love to cook? Exactly. People are cooking all the time now at home. So what's the most exotic thing you've made at home that you never thought you would be able to pull off yourself, right? Or what's something really delicious that you talked about that was fun? So food is always a great thing to talk about. What's the scariest thing that happened to you? What was the most nerve-wracking? What was the most beautiful thing? What's something that you never expected to happen? And this could be a work environment, right? This could be in your last job or across your career, or there's a whole lot of different ways that you can approach stories. Next slide. Then the P is for priorities. And it's kind of a little bit of a play on story, but it kind of puts a little bit more of a boundary on the conversation. So what was your favorite thing? What was your favorite, we could go back to food. What was your favorite flavor? What was your favorite thing that you learned? What are the top 3 things you learned, right? Or pick one thing. So if someone feels like, oh, it was just so many things, what's the one thing? What was the one thing you took away? What's the one thing you'd love to do again? What's the one thing you learned? That was our question that Darlene posed for us in our second breakout group, right? What's the one thing you're going to take from tonight that's going to help you in the future? So helping people to prioritize and then asking them to really honing in. If they, oh, I don't know one thing. Oh, come on, you got to give me one thing. It's always fascinating to see what they come up with. And then the F is for feelings. And this is something that I think sometimes we avoid in the working world. Sometimes we feel like we can't talk about our feelings, but let's be honest, our feelings are part of our world regardless. It may be business, but your feelings are still part of it. We're all exhausted right now. We all know that we're working from home. Feelings are part of it. So asking people, the appropriate people in the appropriate times, how they are feeling, and then how do they want to feel? Those are really interesting questions. And then how do they want others to feel? And that can be something within the context of a work product that you're creating. It could be in the context of the kind of environment, the kind of company that you have, or the kind of, your membership group. How do you want the membership to feel about it? What are your hopes? What are your dreams? What do you value? Those are really, really great questions to really get to know someone. And then the last E is for expertise. And this is a really great one too, especially if you meet someone who has had experiences or has been a part of things that are interesting to you and that they have a perspective that you want to know more about. Ask them, let them know, ask them what their advice is for you as someone who's interested in something that they've done or been a part of. Asking them what kind of changes they've seen is a really great way to do that. Any Austinite who's been here more than 5 years, asking them how Austin has changed since they've been here, they will have stories to tell you, I promise. And that tells you a lot about what they value and what's important to them and what they miss and what they love. All Austinites love to talk about how things have changed, right? And then what trends or predictions do you see? If it's somebody who's been in the same industry, for example, for a long time, they probably have an idea of where they think things are going to go. And it's always interesting to see what they have to say about that and what that might look like. So I feel a little bit like I didn't get the memo on this particular part, because this is normally where I do my Maya Angelou quote about how you make people feel. But since my predecessors have already done such a great job with that, I guess I'll skip that. But I did want to share another quote by Esther Perel, because she was talking not too long ago about the fact that when we get together now, because of COVID and because of this era that we find ourselves in, there are a lot of questions that we might have normally asked that are now a little bit more difficult to ask, right? So asking someone even just, how are you doing, is a lot heavier than it used to be, right? Or asking someone how their job is. So many people have lost their jobs. So many people's family life is tenuous because of work, or maybe they, someone that they know is sick because they had to keep going into work because they were an essential worker. There's a lot of things that are caught up with that. Even asking about how are things at home? How's your family? Relationships are strained right now. People are losing their homes. I mean, there's lots of things those questions are a lot more difficult. And so on one hand, we could say that we don't want to ask those kinds of questions, or we could take this as an opportunity to really ask deeper questions about how we are changing because of what we've seen. And what is it that we want to create on the other side of this? I think we have a real opportunity to be intentional about what's next and have a real opportunity to look at creating a world on the other side of whatever the other side looks like. We can create it now, and we can create it together if we're willing to be brave enough to have those kinds of conversations, if we're brave enough to ask those kinds of questions. And so she mentions these questions here of, how has your personal definition of success changed? And she tells the story of a couple of friends of hers who were musicians. They were traveling all the time. They were world famous and all over the world all the time. And now suddenly they find themselves at home together all the time. And their idea of how they spent their time and what was important and who should get their time and who should get their attention had changed dramatically. And that's the kind of conversation that they were able to have now versus what they would have had in the past. So just remember to dig a little deeper, ask some little harder questions, really find out how people are feeling, and give yourself an opportunity to be creative together to create what's next. And I think that's it. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Sally. That was great. I'll invite everyone to ask any questions that they have. Please feel free to unmute yourself or to put it through the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It seems like this is great for networking, but would you say a lot of these questions would be great for interviewing people as well? Are these tactics?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I use them all the time. I do a lot of data gathering for my clients, and I do a lot of focus groups and a lot of interviews with constituents of various kinds. And I use a lot of these questions to get people really talking about what's really important to them and why they really care and why do they engage and why are they a part of the work that's happening around them. So yeah, absolutely. They're great interview questions. They're great for data gathering. Yeah, they'd be great around the dinner table, honestly. They're great questions.
What advice do you have for getting people to talk more? If you're asking open-ended questions and they're giving you very short responses, any tips and tricks for?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, and I think that's part of it is being willing to sort of read the room, right? And know if you're not going to get information out of someone and someone doesn't want to talk, you can't force them to talk to you. And I think being compassionate about that is super important. I sometimes will kind of tease people a little on the like, okay, give me one thing. You can tell me one thing, right? Like, what's one thing that you're really excited about, or one thing you don't want me to ask you, or whatever, like you can play around a little bit with some of those, particularly the prioritizing ones, and get people talking at least a little bit. You can usually get them to at least laugh a little bit, which can help with some of the awkwardness. But at the end of the day, sometimes people just don't want to engage. I sometimes don't want to engage. I get it. So it's totally fine to kind of create a little space for people too. So
Just talk about food. You'll be fine.
Totally. Yeah.
I think by changing the way you ask, you can pull more information out of it. Mm-hmm. Like when my coworker made a mistake on the report, if I asked, why did you make that report? Instead of asking, help me understand why you made report this way. Yes. And I was able to make her speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That why kind of question is always so helpful, and sort of how did this come about, or how did you get to this conclusion, or those kinds of things are much more helpful and much less accusatory, right? Help me understand how we got here is also a great one. I am confused about this. Can you explain to me where we are? So yeah, this can be great for difficult conversations. And again, that follow-up question, okay, tell me a little more about that. I still don't understand. I'm still not quite there. that can be another great way to keep them talking until you get to the root of whatever it is you need to get to the root of. Anything else?
Hi, Sally. This is Sharon. And I have a question. I'm gonna put in my video. Oh, well, maybe not. Okay, so I have a question. And this is in a work scenario. How do you deal with people that are not within your chain of command, but are on a different, they have a different reporting structure? You work for the same, in my instance, a department, and they're making decisions that you feel like are the wrong path.
Right.
How do you try to understand where they're coming from? And it's not more of, explain why you're doing this, because, they're 3 levels above you. So if you ask them that type of a question, you're really not going to get a whole lot of information. And I'm in the kind of, I work for the tech team. So, I want to understand from the business side, is there a reason why you're making these decisions that from both a technical perspective and from a citizen perspective, it seems like a complete disconnect? But how do you kind of maybe just draw out some information from them so that maybe you can make changes on unbeknownst to them, maybe on the back end, to kind of fix the problem, and then I don't care if they get the credit, I just want to fix the problem. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that that's a really great question, an important one to ask. I think the first step is really, if going back to the process of really starting with your prep and really getting clear why you need that information and how you're feeling about that relationship and having that conversation. If you're nervous about having that conversation, if you're frustrated, if you're angry, any of those things, those are all valid, but be clear about what you're feeling and why you're feeling what you're feeling, and then decide how you want to be in that conversation. It's much harder to make that call in the middle of the conversation when you feel the heat rising, right? Know ahead of time before you go in how you feel and how you want to feel in the conversation, how you want the conversation to go. I think that that's really important, because if there's frustration there, if there's angst, if you're bringing baggage from something else, that may be less helpful. And then I think honesty can be really good, to just say, I'm having a hard time understanding this piece of it. From my perspective, I want to make sure that I'm setting you up for success. Can you explain a little bit more about why this makes sense, and being as specific as you can, so that they have an opportunity to understand your side too. Because part of it is you're wanting to explain why it doesn't make sense from your side, so that they can understand it too. Because they're not seeing it from your side; they only see it from their side.
Right. Okay.
Is
Thank
that
you. Yeah, no, it does help. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Could I ask one more?
Yeah.
Sorry. The advice seems very good for specifically like one-on-one conversations or one-on-one question ask. Do you have different pointers or advice, or would you modify it at all if it's like a one-to-many? Like I sometimes have, like, I work with very, very introverted people, and sometimes it's tough when we're trying to have a casual conversation. Like, we all go out to lunch and I'm like, hey guys, anybody have a good weekend?
Yeah, right.
And nothing, right? And you don't want to just be like, how about you, Jason? How about you, Tony? How about you?
Well,
right?
you could just embrace the awkward altogether. I mean, I'm a facilitator, I do this all the time. And now we're going to go around in a circle. Everyone is going to answer this question, right? Just embrace it. Be the camp counselor. Just like do it. Just go all in on it and make it happen. And I will say, one of the brilliant things about Zoom, I know we don't want to talk about brilliant things about Zoom, but one of the brilliant things about Zoom is that you have multiple ways to engage people. So Ashland did such a beautiful job, I think, at the beginning of like, throw it in the chat. Do you think this? What do you think about that? Right? And some people don't want to engage verbally. They want to engage on the chat. And, if you have a group that you're trying to get information from in that way, sometimes the chat is a much better way for certain people to engage and not make that a less than or greater than, right? Just If that's the way you want to engage, cool. If you want to talk, cool. If you want to wait until you're in a breakout group and then report back, that's also cool. So giving people lots of different ways to engage can help. And then just staying on it and not being afraid to be the awkward first person to say, okay, or to go first, right?
Right, right.
I have a question. So do you have any recommendations for, because I mean, there's a coworker that we go to lunch often, and it's really funny because he's one of those people that's kind of always on his phone. And it's so hard to break him away from that. And like, I'll try to do the same thing of what Nicole was saying, where I'm like, how was your weekend? How's your family doing? You're going on this trip coming up. How's that? Are you excited? And he's just, will give me the one line and then look back at the phone. And it's funny because I don't ever pressure anyone to go to lunch, but they're always like, do you want to go to lunch? And I'm like, oh yeah, let's have a conversation. So I don't know if you have a tip for that, if there's any.
Oh, yeah, that's a super hard one. Yeah. I would go back to the 3 things, right? Like, because then he has to pull out long enough to at least answer the 3 things. And maybe within that amount of time, you can keep him engaged and kind of break the habit. And if not, at least, you got 3 sentences out of him, which is more than you would have anyway. So I think the prioritizing helps in those kind of situations because it gives some parameters. So it's not just like, how was your vacation? It's what was the best thing that you did on your vacation, right? Okay. And if you ask a question that's a little bit not what they're expecting, then they have to stop and think about it. And that also will break the phone addiction. They'll be like, oh, well, I haven't thought about that. Like, oh, I don't know what the best thing I ate was, or I don't know what surprised me the most, or, what was the funniest thing that you saw. And so if you ask them something that surprises them, that also can help kind of break that up maybe a little bit.
Awesome. That's a good point. I don't think I've ever really drilled in too deep, but I'm going to try that because I'm sure we'll have lunch this week.
Oh, good. Well, let us know how it went.
Okay, thank you.
Or try Mallory, everybody puts their phone in the middle of the table and whoever grabs theirs first pays the bill, right?
I love that. I'm going to do that with my family next time because my mom and my brother, they're the worst. Every time we go out to eat, they won't pay any attention. I'm like, you guys, why did y'all even want to go out to eat together?
Yeah. And I love that you have to pay for it if you're the first person to grab it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Perfect. So we are going to go into our last breakout session, and if raffle winner is Megan Baker. Congratulations. We also have 2 winners. We came up with some criteria for 2 other winners. And so we have one that goes to the member that attended the most events this last year. And Dina Saunders is our winner for, oh, sorry, I went out of turn, is our winner for that. So congratulations, Dina. And then one back. Our longest standing member of Austin Women in Tech is Rachel Thomas. So all 5 of you will be getting email correspondence about your prizes. So just make sure you get back to us on how we can get them to you, and we'll get that going. And then I think the next thing is who's looking and who's hiring, which we are coming up close to the end. So we're not going to do the exact same thing as we normally do. But please put, if you are looking or you are hiring, please put it through the chat. And all of the chat, the recording of this, the slides for the speakers will all be going out in our recap email. So you'll be able to access all of this. And then I wanted to let Digital Turbine is our sponsor for next month. I wanted them to jump on really quickly and just tell you about their company and what openings they have for just a minute or so. If you want to jump on here.
Happiness.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
Yeah,
Hi,
yeah.
Happiness. I'm a technical recruiter at Digital Turbine. We are hiring in areas of tech, reporting. We also have some roles in revenue and product. It's a really exciting time to be at Digital Turbine. We're the leader in mobile app applications. We have a lot of diversity. We love supporting women and growing their careers. So if you're interested in some opportunities, please have a look at our page. I posted the link there, and I'd love to connect with you all.
I have to ask, is Happiness your given name or is it self-appointed?
It's my birth name.
Nice. I love that. Love that.
Do you have anything to add? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure how much time we had, but did you have anything else to add?
But we won the company culture award this year from the Austin Chamber of Commerce. So,
and we were nominated for Technology Innovators Award as well.
Yes. And we like working together.
Yes, we do.
That's really important. I love it. Well, perfect. Everyone keep going ahead and continuing to add anything that you are looking for. And then I am going to hand this over to Emmy to announce our boss ladies. Emmy, are you there?
Sorry, I was typing in the chat and then had to resize my screen. So yeah, we didn't, our January event, if you remember, that was jam-packed with things. So we did not have time to announce our winners for January. So Michelle, please forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Michelle Shonenbeck and Nupur Gupta are our January winners. And then February is Ann Sellison, who was one of our speakers in last January, and Sonia Stoffer. If you're active on Slack, you can see Sonia helps us out with digital marketing. She gives us lots of great tips and tricks and cool things to learn on Slack. So welcome to the Boss Ladies group. We're super excited to have you. Make sure you reach out to me and I'll make sure you get your shirts, your Boss Lady stuff.
Amazing. And then I'm going to hand it over to Taryn to talk about membership with, oh, you guys are all members. So you guys all know the benefits of it.
Yeah, we already got them hooked.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. Happy Gal-entine's Day. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. We appreciate you guys taking your time to do this, and that everyone was able to reschedule because of the craziness last week. Hope everyone's back to having power and heat and water and all of that good stuff, and we will see you guys in March. There'll be details coming out about that event, hopefully by the end of this week. So thank you, everyone. Keep adding to that chat if you're looking or hiring, and we'll see you guys all in March again.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Hope you got a lot out of tonight. I did. Thank you to all our speakers, to Ashland, always great information. Darlene, always fun and exciting. And Sally, thank you. I liked the spiffy. I'm gonna keep that one.
Thank y'all so much. It was awesome. Woo!
Thank you.
Woo!
And everybody got their